Wait, we are Bluetooth the speaker to Discord.
Okay, and this is the spray. You can pick out the fish vertebrae, but because we don't have a key at the moment for your country, you can make one yourself by catching the fish. We have a strain from Scotland, and with these keys to the bones, you can see that. So you could make a book like this from Malaysia. And this is the Scottish strain. So if anybody, we can tip a bit out here. Yeah.
So you can see just by pulling this apart, this is obviously the Eurasian otter from Scotland, but you can identify the prey. So here seems to be some sort of crustacean, maybe from looking at it, maybe a squat lobster, which is a species we have here, over in Scotland. And if you just keep looking and keep looking through it, there's a vertebra of some sort of species that you could identify with the book that Dr. Paul just showed. And there's also seems to be some sort of crab shell there, stuck together.
I mean, it's a really nice. It's like playing a game. Find a fish vertebrae, just look through the key, and then that's it, and then you mark that down.
There's another big, larger fish vertebra, which could, through and analysing it from the guidebook, we could distinguish whether this was just a continuation of a increasing size of species or a different species altogether. There's another one there. Grab that. So there's many different vertebrae and many different styles that can be gained. And with obviously with the smooth coated otter, you've also got the scales, which I'm struggling to pick up. The scales there, which can also be identified and not just the fish vertebra. Whereas the Eurasian otter tends to eat smaller fish, so it's mainly based on the fish vertebra for the analysis.
So does anybody want to have a go? Have a look. You two are closer. We could sit that over here.
Yeah. There you go. So this seems to be some sort of crustacean leg or perhaps a crab leg. This looks like another piece of crab. There's another vertebra of some sort of fish. Not that one. The darker one there. So you can see they're all, like for example, the difference between these two, that is significantly different to the one above. They have slightly different characteristics. One obviously has 2 points. One has single points on each side. This leg of the vertebra starts at the bottom, whereas it starts in the middle. So there's slight variations between all the vertebrae that we can see within the sprint. They're all different. That was just had a little piece snapped off when the otters chewed it. This one's the same, but again, slightly larger. So just by this simple process, you can gain many different species and many different pieces to the jigsaw of what your native or local otters are eating. See more, it's another sort of crab leg.
So you just so the species and the body
See that is the same amount of spray after being in the solution for, I think it was just 24 hours, excuse me, and that was the outcome of it. So that's the same.
So it turns white.
It's not necessarily turning white, it's just taking away all the kind of mucus and impurities of the spray and just leaving the pure fish-based remains.
One tablet or one spring.
One amount roughly that size, yeah.
So I don't know if you can get this.
That also would be a question. Imagine that being what you in terms of finding it just by that looking like that, so that was 24 hours. We did that earlier.
I think if we were using
yes.
So I should use this to wash my clothes.
As a fish expert, there you go. There's a vertebrate right there for you.
I don't know the species. If I look at the vertebrae,
You actually.
I only know the morphology,
Uh,
the physical appearance, the anatomy. But yeah, I can take some photos and extrapolate it from fish that I collect. This is big fish.
From straight from here?
yeah, that was what we collected on Sunday.
Oh.
Yeah.
And there's different, like Reza Lubris's presentation earlier, there's different scales. I'm unfortunately no fish expert, but you can see that one's round, that one's, well, I think that might be two, but still different shape altogether. So fish experts like yourself should be able to distinguish that very quickly. I'm just joking.
Like salmon.
Yes, yeah. If anyone can.
This heads of the fish. these parts of it.
Well, I guess
Always
the
the vertebrae and the
vertebrae are relatively small in comparison to the mouth or the smaller the bone. It's quite substantial. Yeah, it's probably there.
You can see a lot of the feet scale in the.
There's different shapes. One has this kind of shape.
Yeah. This one maybe.
Probably different.
This one should be now. This one look like my nail. I just break mine. See? Baby, that is mine, you know.
Otters be eating, yeah.
See that? Right? My nail,
It looks like
You saw it in the bathroom, isn't it? One thing I find this is interesting is what? Their digestion system. The otter digestion system. Because you see, they don't really digest anything.
Yeah, yes.
So they can just see anything if they can eat it. When they can eat it.
Chewy, so they still have a lot of large amount of elements that can really ID what they eat. Because I saw it's similar like what they see. Normally we will feel while
Yeah.
easy to say
Bang di kat kan.
Rasanya tetap.
Ini tulang ikan.
The right one.
This one is crab.
Yep.
So only two species.
Yeah. Crab and fish.
This one is straight of what species?
Which species?
Which species?
If it's crab, it's small. Actually, small claw. Yes.
Small claw otter.
Usually, otter yang makan ikan usually smooth bone.
Small otter.
Small eat crab, kebab.
This one.
Yep. Kalau fish, smooth coated.
this one.
How about this one? Speaks to.
I think when they taking the sample, they mix the strain phosphor with this blood.
What's the time taken
Because what is it?
go through one?
Kalau the fish bone, we using this bone to determine which species refer to this bone. There are several species in this book. Tapi ni Europe punya lah, nak Malaysia punya. Jackgill, salmon, yeah, center pounder.
So it depends. You can
There are about 20, yeah,
20
species of fish here.
That's always
If you found somewhere like this is where you hit fish. If you hit fish, the one is like this. Yeah.
And then when you're what you do is you're looking for the shape of the sky. Has it got lots of lumps? And each ball has it's basically fence. You look at it and say, some of them, one of them is bluish colour.
So you must know.
This looks like quite solid.
Yes, it does. Obviously. It's quite substantial with the fish they eat. I think Eurasians, yes. He said
It just looks different from all the other boats there.
This one I don't really know what it's called.
Several fish.
Looks like one of these are small. Yeah, probably they are getting a lot of fish.
From our site or
Maybe we should see.
This one is
This one is fine.
This one's small.
Yeah.
I think it fish is smooth coated. Maybe during the spring sunday they can find the spring sun.
Could be legal, right? Yeah, could be legal. I'm not good at this. It's not, it's difficult. Here, was it possibly?
The place, one of the, yeah.
Oh. Yes. It's the other way around. Yeah.
Looks complex.
Yeah. Very complex. But probably the flat one, something like that, could be as what you said, probably somewhere here. Yes. Imagine we are filling up the entire thing now. Oh. Yes. Promo? Oh, okay.
Is that the same one?
Oh, okay. So, crab. Okay. So we will have a crop here. So put it here. So it's good to have a crab. So this could be a crab as well.
Oh,
This is not from Malaysia. What did you say?
I think it's from the head part.
From the head part. Oh, okay.
I think so because the head part is had a face.
Maybe the jaw,
Yeah.
the face. Okay, students. So
Finish it up.
finishing up.
I'm streaming online.
Yeah, most just 4 hours will be done with it.
This part is
It's the center. All of this, right?
this.
Yes.
We're just assuming that all of this is from this fish.
Yeah. This is fun. Isn't it?
You're good fan already.
Yeah. I'm more of like, I'm trying to hold, hoping that I don't break the food. She was saying that it could be a crab once, but want to try?
Because the red one looks different.
Crab? No. I was specifically looking for the part of the fish. I couldn't find it. Yes. This could also be some right here. Oh my god. This is very interesting.
I should eat my fish carefully.
Next time we eat fish, the moment we take the flesh, we look at where's the spoon. Identify.
Oh, I just ate everything. I just ate
I
everything
know this
and
one.
left this one.
What's that?
The other bones are good. This is from here.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wonder is
See, he
eat fish.
I know.
Do you want to try?
The participant is waiting for you
To complete it.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Alone we can do a little. Together we can do more. Come, let's do. I'm just wondering about the compartment at the same
One question is this same species of fish?
Probably. The way we have eaten a few.
This is from the middle. Because it's broken, I think this is like hollow. I'm not sure, but definitely it's not this fish. It's quite big also. Yeah, it's also from the spine.
Hi, Fred. You can share your slide.
Yes, give me a second. Hello, everyone, first. We have too many screens, so I need to make sure that I share the right screen. Hello, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I wish I could have joined in person. However, Larissa might have mentioned that we recently that our second daughter was born recently, and I just even though as much as I have interest in otters, I had to look after my family. Therefore, still very happy that I'm able to talk a little bit about my work online during this workshop. You can hear me right, correct? Just not hearing anything. Hello, hello. Just to make sure that I'm not talking to the void.
Can you answer?
Okay, I think I got it. So I assume that you're hearing me. So unfortunately I did not make it to Larissa's wonderful presentation, but I heard her test run in the morning. It was 4 a.m. in the morning, so I couldn't get up at that time. But I know that she was talking about, and in this session I kind of want to give you a little bit of the more practical insights of what you can do with footprint and a little bit of the statistical backbone and different methodologies that are lying underneath. So just a quick recap of what we do in Wildtrack and what our methodology is like. Generally, our main idea was to use non-invasive monitoring techniques that can be widely found, and it's a technique that can theoretically can be used for various species, almost any species that leaves a footprint. What we do is we use images of footprints, and we use machine learning classification models to aim for different kind of output. An output can be a species. So for instance, that you want to distinguish between sympatric species overlapping just by looking at images of their footprints. An output can be a binary classifier, whether it's a male or a female. An output can also be identifying individuals, though this is a bit more complicated, but nevertheless, it has been successfully been demonstrated for quite a variety of species. And if you can identify individuals, you can actually also make population counts. How do we work? Well, machine learning is it's called, well, it's a sort of a statistical or computer scientific overview for models that are not rule-based. So you don't give the rules while you do the modeling part. The model actually learns from data. So technically, you give a data set to a computer machine. You make sure that you have a good label data set, so that all the females have the label female, all the males have the label males, and then you give them a bunch of variables and basically let the computer learn from that. And when we develop new algorithms for new species, we do that by taking images of usually captive or known individuals or whatever our target variable is. So we make sure that we have labels. We can do that easily via taking images of your phone. Just make sure that you have a ruler next to it. And with these known images, we build image databases. And with these image databases, there's two potential routes you can go. One that is currently still under development is that we use state-of-the-art computer vision and artificial intelligence. So technically that you get almost real-time feedback of your image of what it is. I'll show you that. I'll give you a little demonstrate in a second. But technically, what we try to do is teach a computer to identify footprints, and once it's able to do that object detection, to also classify the footprints also with the target labels of what species, what sex, with what individual. We have cooperations with excellent computer science schools. There's a cooperation going with Harvard Computer Science and also Berkeley University, who do most of the modeling in that. So what we do at Wildtrack is we want to make sure that the data that is provided is correctly labeled and widely available, and that we have a good pipeline of actually sharing this data. Because when it comes to machine learning, what's usually the process is that the more data you have, especially the more good data you have, the better the models will get. So it's learning from new data. At this stage, the AI is doing quite well in classification accuracy, but it has not surpassed a human expert level. So we have a second route of a methodology where we also use images of footprints. And in this stage, a human operator, when it comes to otters, this is usually me, extract geometrical information of the footprints. So for example, out of a single otter footprints, I set a few landmarks, which I will also demonstrate. And with these landmarks, I can extract more than 200 measurements. These measurements contain distances, these measurements contain areas, these measurements contain angles. And even though for simpler tasks like species classification, it's probably not necessary to have that many variables. When it comes to more complex situations like individual classification, this is definitely more useful. And then there's several modeling steps, which I don't want to bore you, but you can ask me questions if you want to talk more statistics about it. But at this stage, these user-operated models have higher accuracies, but both the artificial intelligence road as well as the machine learning road with an operator have the same output. And so to sum it up, our input is very simple. So the methods that you need are just a smartphone with a fairly good camera and a ruler and the ability to find footprints. And with that, you get models for different levels with quite high accuracy. And I was told by Larissa that you have already been into the field, that you collected some images, and the first step is when a field researcher wants to cooperate with us is to have a good way of sharing the data so that the data gets rightly labeled within our image database. And so what you see here is the Wildtrack AI website. You can find it if you just, I don't know, I'll put it into the chat, but Larissa probably also shared this. So it's technically just wildtrack.ml. And within that, you also get informations about how the models currently perform. Every couple of months, there's an update, I would say. So at this stage, we have almost 15,000 images from 91 contributors and images of more than 80 species. Of these 80 species, we have enough images so that we can, so roughly to build a species models, you need at least 100, ideally more images of one species. Ideally, you have quite a high distribution among different individuals. And yeah, of these 15,000 images, we have, and of these 40 species, we have 14 species modeled so far. The species classification models have accuracy of almost 90%, and individual identification is not so high on when it comes to AI, but I know that there's an excellent team of computer scientists currently working on that, and our goal is to further improve this accuracy rate. So when you're in the field, when you collected your footprints that you would like to share with us, first of all, you need to log in. So you log in with a Google account, or you set up an account with an email address. Once you've done that, once you're logged into the website, you can click on new observation. From your observation, it's asking you where it's asking you for a location. So either you can include the GPS, or you can just go by saying, hold on, I had by inserting an address. So then you can define if it's a species that you know it is. So for instance, since it's a captivity species, or you're a good tracker so that you can clearly identify and there's no chance of misidentification in here, you can actually scroll down. So what I'm going to demo in a second is I'll upload a batch of images that I collected in Portugal last month. These images belong to Eurasian otters. So I'm looking for otter, and I have Asian small clawed, I have Eurasian, I have smooth coated at this stage. Then if you're collecting images from captive individuals, and you can surely assign that this is an individual that you know. You can classify its name. The images that I'm going to upload are from an unknown animal, so I don't know its identity. I think I collected it the last time I did some field work, and that was in December last year, and it was on the That was on the 15th of December. So you can specify the date, specify the time, and what's also important, you could specify whether it was found in captivity or whether it was in wild. So once you clarified your labels, you can select images that you want to upload. So usually your browser on your computer opens up. So, and what I want to do is I want to upload these images. So you're only allowed to upload 12 images at a time. And what's really important when you do uploads of more than one image is that you're certain that they come from the same animal. So for instance, what I do in Portugal, I do a lot of my research in coastal dune systems. So it's quite easy to follow the otters. So technically I just follow up on a trail which I can easily identify belonging to a single animal. And within this trail, I can, I don't know, take images of the best footprints that I found along the way. Footprints can definitely come in different qualities, and with many data science, the models are usually better when you have better quality data. Okay, so I have these 12 images, and what I can do now, if I'm able to do that, is I can distinguish between the feet. So this one I can tell it's a left front. That's another left front. This I am not 100% sure. I think it's also a left front, but since I don't know, I just leave it open as unknown. That's another left front. That's a right front. Nope, that's a right front. That's another right front. That's another left front. So this is more than one image, more than one footprint. So I can't assign a single label to it. I'll assign multiple footprints to it. It's also good to have overviews like this one. I'm not sure if you can see this on your screen, but if you have multiple images and multiple footprints within one image, it's important to label it as multiple. Then this one is a right hind. That's another left front. And that's it. You can set comments for every image. So for this one, even though I set the label unknown, I would comment, I think it is left front, but I am not 100% sure. So whenever there's one of us doing quality assessment, and we also have the same impression that it's left front, we could either give that label or we just leave it out. Then if there's any additional information that you would like to share, it's like trail of an otter and the Bodeira dune system in Portugal. Weather was nice, or whatever you want to share, you can leave in some notes. Last but not least, you click on submit, and you see a progress bar, and your images will be uploaded. And once this is done, you'll get a notification, or at least you should get a notification. So you can see that it's still submitting. Well, while we're waiting for that, I might give you an insight of what's on the backbone, more or less. So what you have here is also images of Eurasian otter footprints. And and the question here is, for instance, is let's just take this off. So these are predictions from the computer. And when it comes to, before you can do any classification, before you can classify whether this is a left front or right front, or whether this is an otter or a raccoon or a fox or whatever species you're interested in, it's important that when you use AI, you have models that that the computer identified the right regions within an image, so that it's not looking at some areas over here or some areas over there where there's literally no footprints. For the computer system, it's important to identify the right images. And up until a few years ago, this was a very difficult task from a computer vision point of view, because if you think of an image of a footprint, or a footprint in general, what is it? From a different perspective, what is a footprint? A footprint is technically a distortion in a background. So even though you have a relief, and a human eye can easily capture that, for a computer, this can be kind of challenging to actually extract that. It's not, you have the same color in the background, you just have different shadings in a way. But with recent development, especially in using convolutional neural networks and different network architectures, the prediction of the computer actually became quite good. So what I'll do now is I just ask the computer, hey, here's an image of a footprint. Can you, or here's an image, can you see a footprint in here? And I'll just ask him. And what it does, it gives me a prediction. It gives me a bounding box. The computer thinks, hey, it's within this area, and this is technically where I see the borders of the footprints. And yeah, we're currently building models on that regard. The models are multi-species models, so it's not only otters. We can do it again. We'll just, here have another image of a left front. You can see the footprint is visible, but it can be a little bit challenging. We asked the computer, hey, do you see a footprint in here? And in fact, it does. And so it's making really good predictions of where to look for the footprints. So this has made a lot of progress. And yeah, I'm quite curious about the next presentation of the computer scientists of our group, what the next step of the artificial intelligence classifications model are going to be look alike. But this is work in progress. Another alternative, or what I usually work with, is with the use of FIT, which is I use biometric information. So technically, I'm an operator. I manually process the images, and I manually extract geometric profiles. So I extract measurements and areas, like I mentioned before. And this is something that I would also like to demonstrate to you. And then in the last step, I will technically show you what predictions some models that I recently built will make regarding the species of the otter. So what you see here is one of the images that I just uploaded. These were some from my my last field trip when I was working down in Portugal. In Portugal, prediction of the species in regards of otters is quite easy, because there's only the Eurasian otter present. It's an unknown Eurasian, when I want to give that a label, and it's track 1. So what I just did automatically, what I forgot to mention is setting landmark points is to a degree subjective, but one of our main goals is to have a protocol that is as objective as possible in order to make it scientifically robust and make it scientifically comparable. So a first step when we work with footprints is always to make sure that we have footprints aligned. So what you do when I work with otters is I set an aligning axis below the second and the fourth toe. So I make sure that every footprint is orientated in the same direction. And when I work with a right footprint, for instance, I mirror it first, so that I have the order of the landmark points that I'm going to set in order, and I try I'm trying to be as objective and as replicable as possible when I set my landmark points. All right. Prior to setting the landmark points, you need to define a scale. So that's why it's important to have a scale sort of laying close to the footprint. Ideally, it sort of frames it, but still have a little bit of distance to it. So what I do is I go here towards the 0, and then I go towards 10 centimeters. So I define a scale of 10 centimeters. I can define this within the software as well. And then in the next step, I'm going to set 11 landmark points. I can either use a crossfader for that. So landmark points and how to set them are defined here on the left. They're usually, so there's 5 points in the center of the toe. I defined centers other than something like claw marks because in my experience, center points are a bit more robust to variation in substrate. And yeah, that's something we can discuss in more detail if you're interested in that. But then what I do is I look at another 5 points within the metacarpal pad, and the 11th point in the center of the, I think it's a mesocarpal pad, so it's the heel pad. And within these, from these 11 points, I can extract a lot of information. And when it comes to working with footprints, as you might have experienced in the field, not every footprint looks as good as the one that I'm currently processing. So sometimes there's just certain features missing. And this is also something that you can sort of note up here. So for instance, if you're not sure whether the first toe was fully visible, you could mark it over here, or whether the heel pad was missing, you could also mark it as missing. And even though this is not going to be within the scope of this demonstration, part of my research is actually to look into incomplete footprints and how incomplete footprints could also be used for our analysis. But that's probably beyond the scope of this talk. So once you set the landmarks, you can go on derived points. An additional set of 6 landmarks is then calculated. These are usually the corners of the bounding box and also some alignments within the footprints. These are all geometrically defined. Once you've done that, you go to append row and, hold on, no, sorry. You go to new table and then you go to append row. And within that new table, you see, so one data point, first of all, you see the X and Y coordinates of data points, and you see quite a lot of variables that are extracted from one single footprint. So in total, I extract 206 measurements just by setting 11 landmarks. So I try to get a geometrical profile of the whole footprint. So I'll just do it another time with a new footprint. So again, this is another size. That's Eurasian 2. Again, I'll go on rotated. I define a scale. So it's 10 centimeters. I have 10 centimeters here. It's another left front, so I don't need to do any changes. Go to derive points and I go to append row. So I'll end up with a second data frame. And Larissa was kindly enough to send me some images that you were able to collect. So from now on, I'm going to process some of the images that you collected, I think today or yesterday. But I just need to mention that the quality of these images are not as perfect as the ones that I was able to collect in Portugal. So it might be a little bit more challenging to see where I set the points, and some points are definitely debatable. But long story short, in the end, we will have a look of what the model is predicting regarding that species, and then maybe you can give me feedback of what you were thinking of that, and whether you have the same expression than the model has. So I think this one. Okay, what you see here is technically that the footprint is not all aligned correctly. So in the first step, I rotate it. Then I have a look, and I must admit, I don't know what foot it is. I think it's a right front, but that's an image. Oh, sorry, that was not the image that I wanted to show you, because I'm not sure about this footprint. Let's have another go on. Nope, that was not. No, this was the one. Sorry. So when you work on with images that you were not able to capture yourself, it's sometimes a bit more challenging to actually see the details that you're collecting. And what I often do when I work in the field is I try to note, or I try to make sure that the image is sort of directly pointing at the footprint, so that I don't get distracted by other things. What you see here is that this is a double imprint, so that probably the hind foot of an animal was stepping inside of the front foot, so that you get distortion. What you also see is 3 toes that are quite easily visible, and 2 toes that I assume are here and here. I think this is the thumb, and this is the little finger. But again, the quality is not perfect, so this is definitely something that I need to mark when I mark the quality of the footprint. That's something I haven't mentioned before. I usually assess the quality of my footprint so that I have an idea about how much I should trust the prediction. And in general, the better the quality of the footprints, the more likely it is to get a good prediction out of it. Again, you need to define a scale other than the images that I processed before. This is a smaller scale, so it's only 7 centimeters. That's something I need to change when I look at the scale factor. All right, up here, I think this is the thumb, but I'm definitely not sure. So this would be something that I mark as a point where I'm not 100% sure about how to set this. That becomes important especially when the predictions are wrong or don't make any sense, so that I can sort of discuss quality assessments in general. So these points are quite clear. It's the second, the third, and the fourth. Again, the 5th toe is something that I think is here, and I've processed thousands of other footprints. So once you're familiar with the geometry, you sort of start seeing things that are not easy capturable on first sight. But nevertheless, this is also something that I need to mark, because it's not clearly as visible as those 3 toes up top. Then again, the start of the metacarpal is here, and number 7, number 8, number 9 is something where I think I see them, but I don't see them perfectly. Number 10 is something that I'm completely missing. So I have a educated guess that it must be here somewhere. And number 11 is something that I think I see again. So this is unknown Larissa 1. Again, I do the derived points. I make sure I have the right scale. Yes, so this is 7 centimeters. I double check. If you make a mistake here, usually the predictions of your models are totally off. So that's important to always check that the scale is defined accordingly. And again, I go on append row. I'll do it again. Let me check which one was that. So now we go on to this one. that's hardly visible as a footprint, in my point of view. So Joel, the founder of Wildtrack, once told me that I'm seeing the invisible. So I'm trying my best on this one, even though I would generally not recommend working with images of this quality, as that's a lot of educated guessing, and this should not be a scientific method. So again, ideally, the better your footprints are, the more robust your models will be. Nevertheless, the machine learning models are actually quite good in its predicting capability. But let's see. Okay, so here's a toe, here's a toe, here's a toe, and
Hi, Fred. Can you explain to the audience here what you're doing? Because they're looking at a huge table and are wondering what that is. We can't hear you. Fred, we can't hear you. Fred. Let's see if I can.
Can you hear me now? Hello, hello? Hello, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello. Oh, yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm very sorry for that. I was under the impression that that needed to happen, but I think the battery of my headset went dead. So in case you can't hear me anything, just Larissa, call me again or something. All right, going back to where I've just stopped. So the last images I processed, the last two were of fairly poor quality. So what I was mentioning before, even though the model will give me a prediction, I would definitely question the prediction of the model because it really, because of the poor quality of the footprint. In general, the prediction capability of the model is better with better quality data. So what I did, or what you see here, this is a data table of 300 different footprints, 100 Eurasian, 100 smooth-coated, and 100 Asian small-clawed otter. So I used this data table to build a prediction model, an XGBoost classifier. And what I have just done, where you probably did not hear what I was telling you, is I technically put these 5 footprints that I just processed in as new data points, and I asked the model to give me a prediction. So regarding the first 2 prints, I can tell the prediction of the model was correct. These were Eurasian otter footprints. I found them in Portugal, so there's only one otter species present. And so I know that these were Eurasian otters, and the model predicted Eurasian otters. So at this stage, the model did a good job. First 3, I don't know the labels. Larissa just sent me the images. So the third one, which was I think that was oops, it's too big. That was no, come on, can you go a little bit smaller? That was this image. This one, I would say it's an okay quality. It can definitely be better, but I would usually still process it if I have them. Sorry, zooming is not working. If I have images in that quality, I would just mention that the quality could be improved, but still manageable. So that was a prediction of the smooth coated, and then the last 2 were also smooth coats predicted. Even though I would argue having those 2 images, their quality is probably not good enough to process them. So in the end, I'm curious how good the model performed, whether these were all 3 smooth coated or whether there was a mistake. And most of all, if you got any questions regarding FIT, whether it's on the artificial intelligence path or on the biometrical path.
Okay, Fred, kannst du mich hören?
Yeah, I can hear you. Did you
So-
get the last part?
Yes, we heard you. We heard
Thank
you.
God.
So the prediction was correct for the first smooth coated footprint.
Yeah.
The two from the cast from today, that's actually a cast of a Eurasian otter.
Yeah.
You're quite
I thought so to a degree when I saw the footprint, but I'd be careful if I work with cast, because when you work with cast, you still have to keep in mind that you the weight distribution you would assume from a normal gait from an animal can be a little bit different than the way you imprint a cast. But yeah, nevertheless, this is still, as you know, under development, and I think general with machine learning, the more data you have, the more data of different regions, different individuals, the models are just going to get better in my experience. So this is, from a machine learning standard point of view, this is still 300 is a very small replication size. Any other questions? I can't hear anything. I'm sorry.
There's no questions. No questions from.
No
Zoom.
questions?
Yes, no questions from the physical participants. Yeah.
Okay. Then, yeah. Thanks for inviting me. And
there's one question. Just a moment.
Maybe it may not be just for otters, but footprints in general. So
yes.
Obviously some kind of, you call it, is it a landmark points or something?
Yeah.
So are there different types of landmarks does it have to be points that do you set like a center point of the thumb or something? So is there any type of landmarks that maybe we could consider?
Technically, that's something you need to define prior of model building. So for instance, when you look at big cats, where Walter had a few publications on, what they used were, hold on, let me see if I have an example. So other than do I have? No, I don't. So other than using the centroids, it's definitely possible to use the edges, for instance, or claw marks or whatever. So this is just something you need to define prior to model building, and then you need to process a reasonable, big enough data set, technically, accordingly, and in the same way. And then when you want to make new predictions, you just have to process the footprint again accordingly. So for instance, if you work with cats, you don't find a fifth toe. So you probably only look at 4 toes and the heel pad, which Larissa can tell you a lot more about since she's usually working with cheetahs. But so to answer your question shortly, that's something you need to define prior to the analysis, and then just analyze your data all the same way. And then you can do any prediction. So before you start with a new species, I recommend looking at lots of footprints and just see what's consistent within that species. And once you identified consistent landmarks that you find on a wide type of substrate, different habitats. So in my experience, what I try to do with Eurasian otters is I want to build models that work in mud as well as sand. And if you go for edge points, for instance, you have a different way of how the substrate is sort of moved by the pressure applied when an animal walks over a substrate. And so my hypothesis was, or the reason I use centroid points is that I think that a substrate specific variation is smaller in the center of a footprint than it is on the edges. But again, it really depends. If you work in a continuous substrate, it probably makes more sense to focus more on edge points because they're easier to be seen. But yeah, I hope this answered your question.
Hi, Fred. So here's one last question from the physical participants.
Yep.
Hi, Fred. My name is Sandeep Sharma. Thanks for walking.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I live in Germany, so we can meet up there also sometime.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for walking us through this program. Really fascinating. My question is regarding the AI-based identification of species.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if there's any correlation between accuracy of identification and the complexity and size of the species, and the complexity and size of the footprint made by the species. And to make it more clear, for example, if you have a tiger footprint versus a footprint from a smaller cat, then I think the accuracy would go down because there's not information from the footprint. And the second thing is about complexity. So if you have a species like tiger versus elephant would probably won't have that much complexity. So that was my first question. What do you think of that? And second question is about availability of this program. Is it open? I don't know if it is open access, if people can download it and use it somewhere, or is it available on request? Thanks.
Okay. To answer your first question, it's a great question. I have the same assumption, but I don't think that anyone has ever looked into the data. So other than this hypothesis, I can't answer your question. I think I looked in biometrical information, so not AI part of it, but in general, I worked with most of the FIT datasets from Sky and Zoe, and size and complexity of the footprint definitely has a high correlation to classification accuracy. I would agree on that, though I have not run any experiments. So this is more observation other than tested hypothesis. And to answer your second question, FIT is an add-in in JUMP. JUMP is it's an annual, you can buy annual softwares, though on request for conservation, I think it's possible to have a free license. So at least I have been provided with one for my research. And I have been thinking of actually moving the classification algorithms within something open software like Python or R. But my coding skills are not that great that I would say this is a weekend's job for me, so I haven't found the time. But if you know anybody who's interested in developing an R package, shout me an email. This is definitely something I would also be interested to have it more open source and more open available. But in my experience, JUMP has been very helpful when it came to providing free licenses for research and conservation purposes.
Thank you, Fred, for your presentations. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will start our session tomorrow at 2 p.m. as the physical participant will have a boat trip for otter footprint identification in the morning.